Hey everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Brand Federation's Beer and Brands. I'm Matt Williams, Managing Director at Brand Federation, and
Kelly
Kelly
O'Keefe.
O'Keefe, our
Hi,
founder
everyone.
and CEO.
Welcome back.
We are back again at Isley Brewing.
Lovely
We've taken
beer.
up residency here because the beer is awesome, the people are great, and the place is super cool. So for the time being, we're going to be here for a little while.
Yeah,
You
I
could do a
think
lot
so.
worse.
It's home base for beer and brands.
We could do a lot worse. So speaking of Isley, let's bring in Josh from Isley. He's got our drinks for today.
Oh, I can't wait to find out.
What do we got, Josh?
Morning, everybody. So,
Good morning.
technically
By
still
the
morning,
way.
right? Monday morning's a great time to have beer samples. So, first one I've got for you guys is called Seven Melons. It's another hazy IPA that we've done. We utilized a very specific German hop. It's called Huell Melon, and it's super cantaloupe and just bursting kind of melon juice on the nose. So this beer is awesome, super nice and soft. Got a
Perfect
real
for
good mouth.
spring. Do you only serve it in the spring and summer?
It's something that we kind of started rolling out right at the end of the wintertime here, and it's
Okay.
done exceptionally well for us in distribution as well as in the tasting room. So I think we're going to kind of run it all summer.
Oh,
Cool.
It's done really, really well.
Try that one.
Now, the second thing I've got for you guys, I believe we briefly
yeah.
mentioned
That's
last
good.
time we were here, is our new summertime Kolsch. In 10 years of business, almost 10 years of business, we have never actually brewed this very specific style before. Done almost everything else on the market, but we haven't tried this one yet. So we decided we'd give it a whirl. It's kind of light, real summery, and just super crushable. I think it's going to be perfect for the warm weather.
Oh,
All right. Well, let's crush it.
even on a Monday morning, it's
Yeah,
crushable.
exactly, man.
Oh, they're
That's
both
great.
great.
Those
The
Thank you,
melon
guys.
in this is amazing.
Isn't it though?
Yeah.
Those hops are so wild, man.
Yeah,
they're
great.
the things that they're doing with hop genetics these days are it's pretty crazy. So
Very cool. Well, thanks, Josh. As
Absolutely.
always, great to be here. And we'll have you back in just a minute and hear more about what's going on at Isley.
all right, sounds
Thanks,
great.
Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Kelly, we have a very special guest here today.
We sure do.
Erin
Erin
Bishop.
Bishop. Erin has just joined the Brand Federation. She's heading our research. She's a managing director, and she is a powerhouse in terms of all things research and strategy, and has been doing it for a long time. Matt and I know this because we've been working with Erin for a long
Decades.
time. Decades, really.
Decades.
So we're thrilled to have her as part of Brand Federation. We're a company that very much is focused on the research and the insights from that research that informs really great strategy and builds really great brands. So welcome.
Thank you. I am deeply excited to be here. My whole background has been in insights and what makes people tick. I was raised by a sociologist and a ad man.
Oh, wow.
And
I forgot
so-
you didn't really
So
have
that,
much
That's a
choice
fun
in
house,
career.
huh?
I didn't,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh,
my,
boy.
it brought me into what makes people tick and
very
why.
cool.
And I studied psychology, came into marketing, and have this, as you mentioned, thank you, Matt, decades long
Decades, yeah.
career in insights. And I am so excited to bring it to Brand Fed.
That's really cool. Well, cheers.
Yeah.
You should
Cheers.
say we know you don't drink.
Yes, I
But
am a
you're
non-drinker.
enjoying your non-alcoholic beer in a well-branded Isley glass.
I
so-
am. Yes,
All right.
thank you.
That's great.
Cheers.
All right, let's talk research.
Yes.
Let's talk about the role of research in the development of brand strategy. How do the two interact? If I'm a marketing director or I'm a brand manager, how should I be thinking about a responsible use, an effective use of research in developing brand strategy?
I think the best summary is know thy audience
Mm-hmm.
and know thy non-audience.
Yep.
I think of research as really table stakes in developing a brand that connects and understanding how people think and work. My life and my pursuit of what makes people tick has revealed how complicated that is.
Yeah.
So the interweaving forces of culture and the weather and the practical elements really leads to the desire to get as close and as far into the mind and heart of your audience as you can.
Yeah, and it's easy to screw it up,
It's
right?
very
I mean,
easy
like we
screw
used to
it up.
think that if you just got the right people together in a room and you asked them questions, they could tell you what they wanted and you could take that away and go and give it to them.
Yes.
Next thing you know, market share, right?
Yes.
But that's not what happens.
Well, one of the truisms in my field is that people don't always know why they did something
Yes.
or what
That's
they're
interesting.
going to do in the future. And so making sure that you're looking at the confluence of their self-report with other elements, cultural trends, and behavioral data, which is
Interesting.
really where a lot of the brands I think are going now, is interweaving what people think with what they are doing.
Yeah, right. Because they don't always line up.
Yeah.
People lie.
That's right.
They don't mean to.
understanding
self-aware.
why they do is also the finding of the moment too.
Yeah, right.
So when you understand why they're putting on a front, there's something there that you can serve.
That's true. There's an insight in that.
Yes, there's an insight in almost everything, Matt. That's my my mantra.
That's so much fun.
Yes.
And when you're thinking about this, you're talking a lot about the behavior of people, and not just what they do, but why they do it.
Yeah.
Can you use that to essentially forecast what they're likely to do in the future?
That's a tricky business. I think you'll see brands who are really riding the wave of a cultural trend. And I think, we'll probably talk about some of those today.
Yeah.
And in that way, you can predict sort of where people are headed. You can certainly measure what they think they're going to do. But the reality of all of the different forces that play into it are tough. We didn't see a pandemic coming. We didn't see those types of things. So forecasting, it's a big business. There are absolutely ways to get close. But one of the things that is difficult, I think, with research is the instinct is to research your way to an answer. And at the end of the day, the leader still has to make a call, a decision.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, research can't be about certainty.
That's right.
It can be about understanding
That's
why
right.
people do what they do, how they think about what they do, but you're never going to know.
It's not going to tell you exactly what to do.
You will never know and be able to predict the future.
That's right.
But you can know enough about the people you're talking to based on the research you've done that you can make informed decisions
on how to connect with them in the present.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's so interesting. I think so many brands go about research from the wrong place, which is I'm going to do research. It's going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it.
And I'm going to reflect exactly what they said.
Right.
And put it straight into our efforts.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is a very important component of it and should not happen without it. But what they said plus what's happening in the broader world feeds up into that strategic decision.
People are too complicated.
Yeah.
People are too complicated to trust everything they tell you.
And wonderful. Wonderfully complicated.
That's what makes them cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I love your optimistic point of view about people being wonderful.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that I know working with you for so many years is that you love the way that people behave and the way that they think, and learning more about their motivations and desires is fun for you.
It is a blast for me, and I'm good at it.
You're very good.
I have a good
You are
gut
very
for
good
people. And when I can hear and feel sort of the energy of where people are going sometimes, if it's a qualitative eyes in particular. And so I find that endlessly fascinating and understand how to ask also sort of where does your family play into this and so on. So we can really get at some complicated mindsets and the way that they're interacting with complicated topics and therefore complicated brands with some science.
So people are complicated, brands are complicated, the world we
And
live in is
research is
complicated,
complicated,
research is
yes.
complicated. What are some of the cool things that innovative brands are doing in research right now?
First, I'll say fascinating things around Chat GPT and AI. The research and insights world is just a burst with conversation around that.
Our computer overlords are contributing to research. That's
yes.
good.
There are some really fascinating things around biofeedback, like neuro testing and so on for some creative concepts. But I'll say that overall, the best brands are thoughtful and really cohesive with their research. So they have full departments and 365 a day a year listening sessions, and they are looking at cultural trends and familial trends and generational trends and demographic trends, in addition to almost constant refreshed feedback from stakeholders, including customers and non-customers. And that is a wonderful paradigm and protocol, but really not accessible, I'd say, to many of the brands in the country that are hoping to grow and energize.
It's a lot of research.
A lot of work,
right?
and a lot of resources. And some of them are even doing like duplicate research departments. And
Oh,
so
really?
on. But
Like fighting against each other?
yes, well, they can
Blue
come up
team,
with
red team
separate
kind
blue
of
team,
thing?
red team,
That's so
insights
interesting.
departments, which is very cool and fascinating. I love to find a brand that needs an energy and help them streamline from all of those possibilities. There are myriad techniques we can use, but come up with something that's bespoke for their problem and come up with a protocol for them so that they can use some strategy as they're incorporating their insights into their work over time.
Yeah.
That isn't super expensive, that hopefully they can take on monitoring themselves.
So there are more nimble ways to help
Absolutely.
organizations that don't have those massive departments.
That's right.
And you talked about assembling research from different perspectives. And we know at the Brand Federation, we used to think of branding as principally being driven by insights into consumer wants and needs.
Hmm.
But we've really evolved past that to understand that that has to also be married with leadership wants and needs. What do I want my company to be known for? What do I care about personally? What direction do I want to take it in? And employee wants and needs, especially in a marketplace like we have today where there just aren't enough employees going around, and there aren't going to be enough employees to go around for the foreseeable future. We have to compete for people, and we need to know what they want and need. How do you assemble those different perspectives? What I want to do as a company, my convictions in terms of the direction of the organization, what my employees care most about,
Yeah.
and then what those customers care most about.
You can assess all of those elements. One of the most powerful things to do, I think, in that instance is to assess them through whatever research technique makes sense for that brand. It
Mhm.
may be that you want to get in front and talk to some of your customers. It varies,
Mhm.
but coming then back through, so taking your customers or your non-customers and reporting that to your employees and saying what they're thinking and how that's working in with the brand, and then taking the employees' insights and checking it with them and continuing to involve the entire enterprise through the insights process
Right.
helps to then align vertically in the way that you're talking about, down from leadership onto employees, all consistently built around those values that
That's
you've
great.
sort of assessed.
That's a cool idea because I think it gets back to the theme of what you were talking about earlier, which is really about context, right?
Yes.
So I can understand
Hmm.
consumers or customers and how they think, but I also have to understand what's happening in the culture and what's happening demographically and what's happening in the company and in the employees' minds. And like there's so much context that people lose sight of
Hmm.
when they embark on research because they focus so narrowly on
On their topic.
customers or
Yep.
consumers.
Yes, yes. And I think that that can be a danger is to get lost in chasing a consumer whim and losing yourself as a part of that. And I
Yeah.
think the strongest brands are those that have alignment with
Mhm.
values of their consumers. So Nike has very different set of values than NFL does.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and yet, Nike's customers are largely aligned with their values. They're confident in the decisions that company makes, even if those decisions are driven in many cases by their internal convictions.
Mhm.
And I think that's when you get to a brand that is really, really strong because my customers, my employees, and my leaders all have a set of beliefs that guide our decisions.
That's right.
Yep.
And I think from an engagement standpoint internally,
Mm-hmm.
people love hearing about the surveys they took or the research they participated in. They love hearing about what their constituents are thinking. It is a very powerful way to align internally on a vision or a brand.
That's great. I
Yeah.
love it.
It's really cool. It goes back to the philosophy that we talk a lot about at Brand Federation, which is the branding process should start inside. It should
100%.
start with what you believe as a company and the culture you're building and the experience you want to create. Then you get into prospective customers, but you have to start inside.
And so
And
often that's not done.
right. That's missed.
Yeah.
It gets missed a lot. So that's awesome. All right, Erin, you still have some beer left, so you got to
I do.
hang
I gotta
around here,
work on it.
and let's talk about some winners and losers.
All right. I
So-
love winners.
So we've got a winner here, which is a kind of a broad category. And as we were talking, thinking about who the winners have been, this broad category kept coming up, probably on the heels of the NCAA. One of the winners is women's sports.
Absolutely. It is such a good season for women's sports. I think we've seen a lot of positive things happen with the NWSL expansion. The Final Four in the women's NCAA tournament was gripping.
It was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
This whole thing.
yeah, it had drama.
Uh-huh.
It had absolutely dynamic athletes who were at the top of their game, playing exceptionally well. And it had something that I don't think we've seen before. It had an audience,
Yes.
a big audience, and not only an audience, but it started to work its way into popular culture as sports sometimes do. So people were at cocktail parties having conversations about these teams. It's a wonderful step for women's sports to take. It's far too long that it's been waiting for this, but I think it's moving in the right direction.
And women's soccer.
And women's soccer. Yes.
That's the moment that this whole thing tipped. When we think about when women's sports got the rightful attention that it deserved. To me, it was when the women's national team won the World Cup, right? When Brandi Chastain ripped her jersey off and like people started paying attention and saying, this is really cool. They're playing a hell of a game. We need to pay more attention to this.
And pay more money too.
And pay more money.
Exactly. And pay more money. Pay the money they deserve.
Yeah, I do think that kicked it off. I think there were a few other trends at play there. The long arc of Title IX, the very long arc.
Yeah,
and we
true.
may be
It's
really
true.
seeing some of the benefits of that here.
Reaping the benefits of Title IX. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's there. I think our sort of cultural upheaval and eyes on equity has supported this. And something we've talked about a little bit internally is the Ted Lasso show that we all love, but that, you know, from my perspective is really reflecting a cultural change in what we value in leadership and so on.
So that's very interesting. So you're seeing a broad shift in the way, in the culture of leadership that tends to lean a little more toward
cooperation.
Yeah.
I think. And this was predicted by the cultural trends of sort of what is interesting to millennials. We've been watching them age and step into leadership positions. And this is a very we generation. If you don't share it, it didn't happen was sort of a mantra there for a minute. But you can see that then that would translate into these trends. And I don't know that women's sports is any more set up for cooperation than men's sports is. But what they, you know, the opportunity here is that it's not entrenched already in superstar culture. And I think that'll be really fascinating to see how women's sports continues to get branded, especially with all this injection of money.
Yeah.
You know, there's men's sports is really branded.
But a mature brand.
It's a mature brand. Yes, that's exactly right.
Which generally means it's kind of at the top of its game and likely to either remain stable or in decline. Whereas women's athletics is an emerging brand.
Wide open.
So exciting. You know, it's a rare thing in our world to actually be able to spot and watch an emerging trend as it rises. In many cases, you notice it after it's emerged. You're like, oh, wow, I wish I'd invested in that. This is interesting because it is very clear what's likely to continue to happen with women's athletics. It's going to continue to rise. It's going to continue to grow viewers. It's going to continue to grow money. And it is still, though, at that emerging level where sponsors, advertisers can involve themselves with it on the ground floor and actually get credit for being a leader in this movement.
And play a little with what it means to be a sports franchise and how you're valuing it and what is the part of the city you represent that you're reflecting in your team and your brand in a way that can connect more deeply, I think. It'll be fascinating to see.
So interesting, the cultural complement that happens with, you know, men's sports, which tend to be all kind of, you know, macho and individual and, you know, cutthroat. And there's a different feel in women's sports. There's a different culture in the way women's sports are played and the way they lead. And that complements male sports in a way that's probably necessary. We've talked a lot about the NFL. And the struggles they've had and the entrenched cultural problems they have.
Yes.
And your point, Erin, about the broader context of the rise of women's sports, I wonder how much of it is because the culture of women's sports complements male sports in a way that overcomes some of the problems that men's sports have created over the years.
I think there are other things at work too. If we look at, for example, the world of college sports, we have the NIL, we have the transfer portals. These things have given significantly more power to the players versus the coaches and the leadership. And what we're seeing is that is reshaping things a little bit. That angry, bitter, domineering coach image that we once had of an ideal coach in sports is falling away, and it's giving way to images more like Ted Lasso, with a coach who is cooperative, who trusts his team, who values their work outside of the playing field, values their life beyond the hoop or the football. And I think actually even in this year's NCAA tournaments, both men's and women, we saw more upstart teams beat giant respected teams. Once again, the mature organizations in athletics are at risk right now.
Yes.
the up-and-coming organizations in athletics, especially those who are aware that there has been a shift in power, allowing more power to the players who are staking their bodies and their livelihoods on this. It's going to be a very interesting time for sports.
It is. I agree.
Ted Lasso's not going to throw a chair across the court anytime soon.
Probably not. I hope not.
A Bobby Knight reference. Everybody who was born after 1980 is like, what the throw a chair? What are you talking about? Anyway.
Yeah,
And
I
look it
do
up.
remember. Yeah, it did
Look
happen.
it up, Bobby Knight. Awesome. Okay, women's sports, one of the winners. For the loser conversation, it's not quite as cut and dry because we've had a debate about whether some of these examples are winners or losers. But there has been a lot of talk in the press about some recent rebranding. By rebranding, what we mean is brand redesign. Right. So let's get our semantics correct.
Right.
Often people say rebranding, and what they mean is give me a new logo. Right.
Right.
We know it's bigger than that, but this brand redesign, logo redesign, has been very controversial in New York, where Eric Adams came out with the We Heart NYC redesign, and was not
Not a lot of
hailed
love.
as a huge success. How about
Not
that?
a lot of love for that. We don't heart that new logo.
No.
What happened? Like, what happened? What went wrong here?
Well, I think there's a strategic level where it went wrong. And Erin, this really aligns with your beliefs on research. I don't think they involved the audience enough to really learn what the value of the existing iconography was.
Agreed.
I also think you started with an I Love New York logo. It was designed decades ago by Milton Glaser, a brilliant designer. Still, the design still holds up today. It was commissioned by Mary Wells of Wells, Rich and Green, one of the pioneering women in the advertising business.
Yeah.
And it immediately became well respected. It was designed for the state of New York.
Not a lot of people know that, I don't think.
A state of New York effort that, of course, New York City being such a big part of that state and having the same name, it's easy for consumers to confuse it both ways, and it's fine for it to work both ways. But it was designed for the state of New York, and today, or this month, we saw New York introduce We Love New York just for the city of New York, I guess theoretically as a complement to it.
There were a few things that were missed here. I think one insight that would have helped is the correlation that people were making between the I Heart New York design for the state and the city. I think that logo and that iconography had really evolved into a city.
Like, this is super connected with the
This
city of New
is
York.
the city
Yes.
logo, and the people on the inside didn't really realize that because it wasn't to them in their brand architecture book,
Yes.
right? But to the
Yeah, probably
people,
true.
that was what their city was. And I think there was a failure in imagination, in how to energize the city just on the back of what was done for the state.
I think that's true. The child needs to be better than the parent. But I also think it added one more dimension, which is always a tricky dimension when you're evolving logos. And we evolve brands all the time. The dimension was that they didn't just add something to the consumer, they took something away that was beloved. And that, sometimes we have to do that as a brand matures or grows or evolves or becomes more innovative, but it needs to be done very carefully.
I'm not even sure they did. I think they added the We Heart NYC, but people feel like it was taken away.
Yeah.
Does I Heart NY still exist
It
for
still
the
exists.
state,
Actually,
right? Like
nothing was taken away.
When
Nothing
you
was taken away.
changed it, it feels like you're replacing it.
That's right.
So this to
But
me feels like a new Coke screw up.
It does
This is
exactly.
This is well, everybody, we want to be more inclusive, so we're going to change I to we. We want to make it about NYC, so we're going to change NY to NYC. And people seem to like those ideas. So let's go. And what you fail to account for, again, is the emotional attachment to the thing people perceive you taking away.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
So all the testing and all the research said in New Coke, well, yeah, it tastes objectively better. All the blind taste tests said New Coke is better than old Coke. Well, let's go ahead and do it. Well, no, you missed the fact that people love this thing. They love this stuff. And if you're perceived by them as taking it away, they're going to freak out.
Well, and I think that speaks to what we were talking about before around people not always understanding why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm sure in taste tests they would say, I love this new Coke and I would
Yeah,
buy this Coke
right.
over this Coke, and that's absolutely what I'm going to do. But not understanding the nostalgia and the deep and what you
Yeah.
associate it with, and how far
Yes.
back in your family does Coca-Cola brand go, and these things that people aren't always even, they're loath to admit it sometimes, their relationship to a brand, but I'll be darned if it's not super strong.
It's a real thing, right?
The high watermark for a brand is to build loyalty.
Right. And so what a great news when they get ticked off that you tinker.
Yes,
You've got the
yes,
loyalty.
you should be glad of that. Now, I will
Stop
say,
screwing it up.
Yes.
Yes. Well, Coke learned their lesson, right? Because when they created a better, much tastier version of Diet Coke, instead of replacing Diet Coke,
They added it.
they added Coke Zero.
Coke Zero.
So we have
yeah.
both.
And said, we're not touching Diet Coke.
Right.
In our eyes, it's inferior, but we're going to leave you that choice. A good option.
Well, and in a way, the New York City logo is that. They're not taking away
That's
the
true.
I Heart New York. They're putting them side by side, but
Yeah.
they were not
They
a good job communicating
Botched
that.
the communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're too close.
You know,
When
another
they're that
thing-
close, I assume one is taking the place
I
of the
agree.
other because
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for them to live together.
That's
That's right.
exactly
So-
right. Yep.
All right, well that's a loser. So the other brand rebrand that is a little bit of a little less clear whether it's a winner or a loser is Pepsi.
Yeah.
So Pepsi came out with a new logo this past week or two. And of course we all remember the hilarious Pepsi rebrand that happened about a decade ago where the brand book came out and it was all about
Oh my God.
gravitational pull and astrophysics and crazy smile. I mean, if you haven't seen it, look up the old Pepsi
Do.
rebrand. It'll give you a good laugh if you read through the brand book.
Kids, this is why you don't do drugs.
Or if you do drugs,
Or why you do.
go into design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pepsi came out with a new logo. What do we think? Winner, loser?
I think it's a winner.
I do too. I'm
do?
calling it a winner.
It's a winner. How
Mhm.
come?
It's insights based, first of all. I love how it came about.
How is that?
Well, Pepsi regularly, they're one of the great brands that have a 365-day-a-year
Research effort.
research efforts
Yeah.
and insights efforts, and they ask people to draw their logo, which is a great
Okay.
projective exercise. You don't give them much stimulus. You just say,
Mhm.
draw the Pepsi logo. People would do it, and they kept trying to put the Pepsi in the circle.
Oh, okay.
And so,
Like between the layers
Yeah.
in the middle.
and they said, we can't ignore that kind of insight. And they gave the people what they see already.
That's so interesting.
Which I
so it's a
think
little
is-
bit of a return to the old Pepsi logo, right?
Mhm.
It is a bit of a return. And that is the insight to confirm a lot of other decisions and strategy that's involved in that. But I think that's a wise way to make decisions. You don't pave the path until you see the way people are walking.
Yeah, and you interpret that as an expression of equity,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
I can't talk to you in terms of equity if I'm a focus group respondent, but I can draw the logo that I see when I close my eyes, and that's equity.
That's right.
And an important note here is that the professionals on this team, they didn't let the consumer design the logo.
Correct.
They used the
is an important
consumer's
note.
intuitive perception of where Pepsi was as input
Mhm.
Right.
to help inform that design process.
That's
Yeah.
And
right.
I think that's the key to getting this right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I'll go with
And-
winner on that one too.
Would you?
I think so.
I think so.
And
I think so.
I'm going to bet that they tested it, unlike our previous
I
loser,
would guess
that they
I
did a
would
little
guess so.
disaster check.
That's right.
And
I'll
I'm
bet they did.
betting that New York City didn't do much of that.
You know what? I think it's a winner no matter what they did because it brought back the links to the old brand book from 10 years ago,
That's
which
true,
are
which we all
hilarious.
just
It
really
really
enjoy.
And I got a good smile out of that. Well, we've talked winners and losers. Thanks, Erin, for sticking around.
We-
Alrighty,
We're
great to
thrilled
be
to have
here.
you here.
We'll be back with Josh from Isley. Well, Josh, thanks again, as always, for having us back at Isley Brewing. Place is great. The beer's amazing. If you're in Richmond, come on down to Isley in Scott's Edition. And that'll wrap up another edition of Beer and Brands.
Beer and Brands.
So thanks for joining us. Give us a like, give us a comment, let us know what you think. And we'll see you next time.
See you soon.
See you soon.